Coming into the 2024 NFL season, one of the things that I really wanted to watch was the development of Tyree Wilson. The guy the Raiders took with the 7th overall pick last year over guys like Darnell Wright, Jalen Carter, right? Two guys that are probably already top 5 guys at their positions. Tyree Wilson was the guy the Raiders took over those guys. So we needed to see if this guy was any good, right? And last year, he really did not look good. Now, of course, the Raiders also had the emergence of Malcolm Koonce. And I think with that, you're not going to really play a rookie who still has to kind of develop over a guy who has 2 years left and is showing tremendous upside, right? Tremendous flashes. And coming into this season, we're like, Tyree Wilson can either put it together or he can end up busting out this season, right? And if he showed us any sort of hope, then we'd be hopeful for year 3 as well. And early on this season, Tyree Wilson did not look good. I'll be honest with you guys. After the first 3 to 4 weeks, I said this guy is really, really, really bad. He hasn't really shown us a ton of developmental upside, right, coming in from last year to this year. And it just didn't look good. But one of the things that happened this year was Malcolm Koonce ended up getting knocked out, right? So with that, Tyree Wilson started playing more snaps. And again, it was kind of disappointing in the first 4 to 5 weeks. He had one good game against the Cleveland Browns where he had multiple pressures. He had a couple of quarterback hits. But he wasn't able to replicate that after that Cleveland game. He played against the Broncos, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Rams. The Raiders even went out and got Clavon Chasen because even they were disappointed with Tyree Wilson. But over the past 3 to 4 weeks, something's kind of changed with this guy a little bit. Tyree Wilson has actually looked good on tape the last 3 to 4 weeks. Now, he's not a full-time starter, right? Like, Tyree Wilson's not playing 50 snaps a game the way someone like Maxx Crosby would be for the Raiders. But this guy is actually putting together some good plays on tape. And the thing with Tyree Wilson is he's 6'6", 275, so he's not the type of guy that's going to get to the quarterback in like 2 seconds. But if a quarterback's trying to take a 5 or a 7-step drop and there's a deep developing play downfield, there's not a lot of people, 3 seconds, 3.5 seconds that can contain a guy like Tyree Wilson. Because he's strong, right? He's strong, he's physical, he's tough. He takes these guys and he drives them right back into the quarterback. And we're starting to see it a little bit more, right? Tyree Wilson had a really good game against the Falcons, the Buccaneers, even the Chiefs 3 weeks ago. And again, he's only played about 34 snaps per game over the last 3 weeks, but the guy's been actually getting to the quarterback. This season, Tyree Wilson has 4 sacks, and in the last 5 games, he has 3 of those 4 sacks. And more than that, the guy has multiple quarterback hits, he has pressures, he's consistently getting after the quarterback. Now, he isn't Maxx Crosby, right? And I think we got to understand that right away, right? Tyree Wilson is not Maxx Crosby. That's not his game. And nor is Tyree Wilson a finished product when it comes to pass pro, right? Tyree Wilson still has to develop, right? He has to get more than just the bull rush, which is what he's mostly utilizing even at this point. He has a good counter, right, with that bull rush. So, like, he'll bull rush, and then he'll have a second move to that bull rush, which would be like a pull down or maybe the arm over the top. It's a 1-2 move that he has. He still has to develop the first aspect of that a little bit more, right? He'll start with the bull rush most of the time. I want to see him start with a spin move first, right? Or a double hand swipe or whatever it is. So he still has to develop the hands, but Tyree Wilson's actually getting better. The bull rush is working a lot easier. He's being able to get to the quarterback a little bit cleaner. And he's causing disruption, right? And that was kind of what we expected out of Tyree Wilson coming out of college. A guy that's going to cause disruption. And we saw Trayvon Walker kind of take this same approach. First 2 years, Trayvon Walker looked like a bust. This year, the guy looks very, very, very good. Very hard to block. And again, Trayvon Walker, Tyree Wilson, they're not Maxx Crosby. So they're not going to beat guys with the pass rush technique. At least not yet. Maybe they can develop into that. But Tyree Wilson's looking a lot better when it comes to pass rushing. And that doesn't include the fact that this guy's an elite run defender as a defensive end already. Tyree Wilson, to me, is a better run defender than any other guy we have on that defensive line. Right? Of course, not defensive tackles, but like specifically defensive ends. Tyree Wilson is an absolute monster being able to stop the run. Now, he's only played 396 snaps, right? So keep in mind, he's not playing 1,000 snaps the way Maxx Crosby has been for the Raiders pretty much every single year. But Tyree Wilson against the run is legit. And I just wanted to kind of talk about it, that this guy's actually putting it together. And I'm excited to see what this guy can do the rest of this season. Plus, I'm excited to see the developments he takes going into year 3, right? Because I know with guys like Tyree Wilson, it's going to take longer than a guy that's, maybe quicker. He's a little bit more efficient when it comes to pass rushing. Maybe he has a better first step and those type of things. because Tyree Wilson is generally going to be a little bit slower because of that size, right? But we are seeing it flash. So I kind of wanted to just take a second to give a big shout out to Tyree Wilson for being able to kind of do his thing. There's also another report that's coming out. This one comes from an ESPN insider, and I just wanted to talk about it really quickly because we're getting to the point where the season's kind of coming to an end. The draft, right, specifically the draft stock and those type of things, is starting to come together, right? We're hearing more reports, we're hearing more rumors, and apparently Sheduer Sanders prefers the Raiders over the Giants amid the 2025 NFL draft rumors. This one comes out from an ESPN insider. They put it out there saying that multiple sources close to Sheduer Sanders and the Colorado program believe his preference would be to land in Las Vegas. The Raiders and Giants are currently tied with the worst record in the NFL. Now, one of the interesting things with some of these reports that are kind of coming out with Sheduer Sanders specifically is we don't really know who's going to be the number one quarterback at this point, right? There's a lot of people that are saying it's going to be Cam Ward, right? People that I personally trust. So I'm going to kind of go with that as well and say I think it's going to be Cam as well. Not saying Shedeur can't be a good quarterback in the NFL, but people do doubt his ability to play within structure, right? People don't think this guy recognizes the coverage relative to the play that's being designed, and he doesn't put the ball exactly where it has to go on time consistently. And people do think that that's one of the flaws with Sheduer Sanders. Now, yesterday, Deion Sanders was asked a little bit about, if the Giants pick 1 or the Raiders pick 2, kind of what are your thoughts on how the draft's going to end up? And there's another thing I was kind of thinking about, and it was part of why I wanted to kind of talk about this is, the New York Giants have already went down the path of, hey, let's draft the quarterback in Daniel Jones. Let's develop this quarterback, and let's see if we can get the next Patrick Mahomes, or let's see if we can get the next Josh Allen, or whatever it is, right? They went down that path. What if the New York Giants with the number 1 overall pick say, hey, we don't want to go down that path again. Instead, let's go get Sam Darnold, who, the Minnesota Vikings are going to move off of, right? Sam Darnold is signed with the Vikings, of course, and he'll be under contract next year as well. I think he had signed a 2-year contract. But he's going to want to pick that, hey, I want to go to another team. I showed what I could do this year. I took the Vikings to the playoffs. He's going to want to go to another team and say, I want to be the quarterback of the future for that team. The alternative is that the Minnesota Vikings end up keeping Sam Darnold even for another year. And then J.J. McCarthy at that point just doesn't start for that year, right? He just sits, and he essentially sits for 2 years. But I don't think that would be the smart approach by the Minnesota Vikings. I think it'd be smarter for them to trade Sam Darnold and give value for him, right? I know he had success with the Vikings, but I also think Kevin O'Connell is a good coach, and that was a part of why the Vikings are having success. So with that, the Giants had already drafted. Maybe they decide to go away from that approach and say, let's go after Sam Darnold. Or if it's not Sam Darnold, let's go after Kirk Cousins. Right? Cousins obviously had an injury, and maybe he played too quickly from that injury. There's a chance the Giants take the opposite approach. The Raiders tried the approach of, hey, if we can't get a rookie quarterback, right, we're not going to reach. If we can't get one, we'll go forward with Gardner Minshew, Aidan O'Connell. So the Raiders have already taken the opposite approach. So now the Raiders are probably in the market for a rookie quarterback. We'll see what ends up happening. Another reason why I wanted to kind of talk about this was because the Raiders' schedule for the rest of this season, and we'll just get right into this next game coming up against Jacksonville Jaguars, it's fairly easy, right? If you think, when I say easy, it's fairly winnable games for the Raiders, right? You got the Jags, you got the Saints, you got the Chargers. All 3 of those games are winnable for the Raiders, right? Yes, the Chargers from the playoffs. Yes, they're a good football team, but that's a divisional team. I think the Raiders can beat any of the divisional teams, vice versa, right? Any team within the division can beat anyone else, right? But what's interesting about this, right, is that the Raiders play this week the Jags, who don't have their starting quarterback. Then they play the Saints, who also don't have their starting quarterback. And then they got the divisional game to kind of end the season. And the Raiders could easily jump from where they're currently at with the number 1 overall pick. They could easily, I shouldn't say jump, they could easily fall downwards, and they could potentially have like the 9th or 10th overall pick, depending on how the rest of the season ends up going if they win 1 or 2 more games. Just one win, you're picking 7. A second win, you're picking like 9 or 10. So 2 of the 3 wins, you look at how far the Raiders can ultimately end up falling. And Aidan O'Connell is back for the Raiders. So we had heard earlier this last week specifically, Aidan O'Connell probably wasn't going to play the rest of the season. We heard earlier this week that he's probably good to go. He was practicing in full. And Antonio Pierce has confirmed that Aidan O'Connell is good to go, and he'll essentially be the starter for the Raiders coming up. This is a winnable game for the Raiders, man, and I can't overstate that a win for the Raiders in any of these games means you're not getting a quarterback, right? Because there's probably 3 or 4 teams that are interested in getting a quarterback, and there's probably 1 or 2 quarterbacks that are worth first round picks. So that means the Raiders are not going to draft a quarterback in the first round if you win probably even just one game, right? So it's going to be interesting as we kind of go into this next week. Now, we can see the injury report here. Most of these guys should be able to go, right? Nate Hobbs, obviously, he was good to go last week. He is sick, as is linebacker Muaga. But they'll probably be good to go. Sam Webb is questionable. Jordan Meredith is likely going to be out. And this one's kind of interesting because the Athletics' Vic Tafur put it out there that Jordan Meredith is doubtful this week. And what that means is essentially Jackson Powers Johnson would move back to guard and Andre James would essentially move to the center position. And, these guys are at the Raiders practices, right? So what that means is like Vic Tafur can observe it, right? He can literally watch what the Raiders are doing during practice. So what's happening right now is Jordan Meredith did not practice. And in the practices, what happened was Jackson Powers Johnson ultimately took those snaps at left guard, and Andre James ended up coming in at center. I think that's the wrong thing to do for the Raiders. Right? I really, really do think that if the Raiders go with Andre James, you are making your offensive line a lot weaker. You're better off putting Andres Pete in at left guard. And if it's not Pete, find another guy to play. Putting Andre James back in at center and then moving Powers Johnson is the wrong thing to do. Powers Johnson has been top 3-4 center already, right? He's already shown us that. And moving him and going back and forth just doesn't make sense. Jackson Powers Johnson should be the starting center the rest of this season. Put Andre James at left guard. Put in Andres Pete at left guard. Throw in Thayer Munford at left guard if that's what it is. But moving Jackson Powers Johnson just does not make sense to me. And these are some of the decisions that the Raiders coaching staff has made that I feel like makes me feel that I don't want this coaching staff. I don't want this current coaching staff, right? Because it just doesn't make sense to move a guy that has all pro caliber at a position. The development slows down, right? And that's kind of what I'm trying to say. By moving Jackson Powers Johnson, the development slows down, and it just doesn't make sense to continue to move him. But that's kind of where the Raiders are right now. They're potentially going to be moving him. We'll see if that actually ends up happening. But the Jags game is going to be interesting no matter how you look at it, because you do have guys like Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen coming to town. So what that means is you're going to have guys like DJ Glaze going up against some good pass rushers. So we're going to find out a lot more about DJ Glaze as the season kind of comes to an end. I've talked about Glaze multiple times. I like Glaze. I'm not sold on Glaze, but I like him. I like the potential he's shown us. I think there is upside. Obviously, he has to develop. I'm not 100% certain he's, people say Tom Telesco's nailed his first 3 picks. They say he's drafted 3 starters, and I don't know if that's 100% true, right? He's drafted 2 for sure. I'm not 100% sure with DJ Glaze at this point, but we'll see what ends up happening. I'm excited to watch that matchup right there. I also want to see what the Raiders running backs can kind of do with the new offensive line. Sincere McCormick's out for the season, which means Alexander Madison will probably get the nod. Dylan Lobby could also play for the Raiders, so we'll see if he actually ends up getting any carries, if he looks good at all as well for the Raiders. And then finally, I want to see some of these defensive linemen, right? Tyree Wilson, I want to see what he can kind of do against the Jags. The Jags do have a really, really good right tackle in Anton Harrison. I also want to see the rookie that the Raiders picked up from the Indianapolis Colts. I want to see Adam Butler continue to do some things. And then we'll just see what generally ends up happening, right? Let's see what the young corners can do. Let's see what some of these young safeties can do. We'll see what ends up happening, man. And let's go ahead and just wrap this video up. I want to give you guys my underdog picks for the upcoming week. If you guys don't know, we got college football playoffs coming up this week. And we got some interesting games as well, right? So we're going to get Indiana against Notre Dame. I think that's a really, really good game. I'm going to take the higher on the Indiana quarterback, Curtis Work. I'm going to say that he's going to throw at least 3 touchdowns. This one's kind of not really favored for me, I would say, right? I think this one's the one that might not end up hitting. But if he does throw three touchdowns, right, which could happen, right? It could happen. All these other 4 are going to end up hitting. There's just no way Jadarian Price does not get at least 39 yards. Price, very, very, very solid football player. And then Brashard Smith of SMU. I think this is one of the most explosive players in college football. The guy was a wide receiver at Miami for the last 3 years. Went to SMU this year, his 4th year. Transitioned to running back. And now he's one of the best running backs in the country. Travion Henderson, Ohio State. Ohio State has an interesting matchup this week as well. So we'll see if Henderson can actually, be able to pick up some first downs and kind of do his thing. And then lastly, Jaden Blue. I believe he's a freshman running back for Texas, but he's a good football player, right? He's a really, really good running back for Texas. 29 yards, I think, is very, very easy to get. If he gets 10 carries, he's going to get that. So here's my picks, $25. The payout is almost $1,600, right? I think most of this stuff is realistic. The Curtis Rourke 3 touchdowns is going to be the one that's going to kind of decide this. I think the other 4 will end up hitting. If you guys want to make your own picks, there's a link down in the comments below. Select that link and then tag me on Twitter, man. I love talking to some of you guys. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about. We've been talking back and forth. I even started a group with like 5 of you guys. So make your picks, man. Tag me on Twitter. I'll get you guys in that group as well. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time with another video.